And a very pleasant good evening to you. I am Biff Kensington, and this is the Queen City Express podcast. I want to apologize earlier. We had some technical issues that unfortunately cut our discussion off with Taker's Minion and Ryan Sayo in the middle. We're going to try to have Taker's Minion back on coming up real soon for you. Really had a good discussion going. Ryan, unfortunately, wasn't able to stick around for the second half of this podcast, but being the trooper that I am, despite being sick as a dog tonight, we're going to go ahead and finish up this week's episode with our unofficial second part of the WrestleMania Aftermath show. Of course, this afternoon we were breaking down the WrestleMania experience live and in person from the Superdome. Tonight we're going to go ahead and finish up the card and look ahead to the future and talk a little bit about the main event. A lot of people have a lot of opinions on the Roman Reigns Brock Lesnar match. So let's go ahead and get right into it. And of course, as we were discussing earlier, Ronda Rousey in the mixed tag match doing everything in her power to get over with the crowd. She looked amazing tonight. That mixed tag match was probably the highlight of the show. But really, from the mixed tag match on, things really took a downturn. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. I think if there's one thing that could describe WrestleMania 34 on the whole, it would be a show that's uneven. And that's really been a criticism of WrestleMania in general over the past few years, particularly last year. I think everybody is pretty much in agreement. WrestleMania 33 in Orlando, the first few matches on that card were quite fantastic, but once you got to the main event of the show, the last half it really kind of took a nosedive, and that almost happened here as well. I don't believe that WrestleMania 34 lived up to the hype that it had going in. A lot of people looked at this card on paper and thought that it could be one of the greatest WrestleMania shows of the last few years. And honestly, I don't think it quite measures up to the hype that a lot of people had for it. That's not to say that it was a bad show overall, however. As we talked earlier, there was quite a few memorable moments in the first half of the show, and the second half was certainly noteworthy, if not what you would consider good qualitatively. But we're going to pick right up with the second half of the show, and immediately following the mixed tag match, we had the SmackDown Live Tag Team Championship triple threat. The Bludgeon Brothers defending or winning the titles from the defending champions, the Usos and the New Day. This is where the show really started to turn sour for a lot of people, and I can completely understand why. At this point, we were halfway through the show. We knew, of course, with The Undertaker appearing, that we would have 14 total matches. This, of course, is the halfway point, and this is where things really started going sour. It was good to see the Usos get a shot on the main roster, the main show of WrestleMania, rather. It was less interesting to see them have such an uneventful match. The official time of the match was only 5 minutes and 50 seconds. This match did not last long at all. It was very much just a quick hitter. The Bludgeon Brothers, like them or hate them, they are your new tag champions, and they are looking to be fairly dominant tag champions. I don't see them dropping the titles anytime soon. I think we're in for a long haul with them, mostly because they've been built up as this unstoppable force. And when you get these types of tag teams, particularly uh, in this day and age, you're going to try and ride that as long as you can until you have a team worthy to beat them. I don't know that the Usos are that team. I think the Usos could wind up being moved to Raw, and I definitely don't think the New Day is the team to unseat them. The New Day have done everything they could possibly do. It would be a new team, and a new team takes time to establish. So I think the Bludgeon Brothers are going to be in for a lengthy title reign. As a match, this was nothing special. This was basically an extended squash. The Bludgeon Brothers were never really in any serious jeopardy. Very quick match, a very uneventful match, and quite an unfortunate match for the Usos, making their WrestleMania main card debut here. It's really a shame that they weren't able to showcase their stuff more than they were. The rumors of a TLC stipulation to the match never materialized. This was just a straight up triple threat, and not a very good one either. So the Bludgeon Brothers look to be taking those titles and will obviously be staying on SmackDown, provided some tomfoolery doesn't happen that takes the titles off of them. Then we get to a very interesting part of the show. Now, in the Superdome itself, as the live experience, where we were seated, the sound was terrible. And so I cannot give you a recap of what Elias actually said. I know some people sitting closer to the ring, or at least out in the open, had better sound than we did. We were sitting kind of back up towards the concourse. So not only did we have an obstructed view of the stage, despite being across the stadium from it, but the sound also was a little bit lacking when people would get on the microphone. And so, Elias, his segment, a lot of people were kind of upset that he didn't have more to do. It is what it is. That's kind of what I figured would happen when he had no announced match on the card. Undertaker's appearance for this showdown with John Cena. As a spectacle, you can't top the Undertaker and the Dead Man appearance. I'm so very glad we didn't get Biker Taker here. I know a lot of people were angsty for it. I'm not a Biker Taker fan. I prefer the Dead Man gimmick. I wanted to get that full Dead Man Undertaker experience at WrestleMania. So honestly, that pretty much paid for our tickets. The people we were watching with were all huge Undertaker fans. It was nice to have that moment. It was nice to see him in person again. That's someone that a lot of us grew up watching. I started watching wrestling late 89, early 1990. Undertaker debuted at Survivor Series 90, one of my favorite all-time shows for sentimental reasons. So, it was good to see him in one of his final matches, assuming that this is near the end. Knowing Undertaker, he could wrestle these types of matches for another decade. You never know with him. But the experience of seeing an Undertaker entrance was good. As a match, this was nothing special. But not that it necessarily needed to be. It wasn't advertised beforehand, so nobody knew for sure if we were actually getting a match. It's basically an extended angle. John Cena had been talking so much trash for The Undertaker over the last month, and Undertaker showed up and put him in his place. It's as simple as that. Would I like to have seen a longer match? Yes. Is The Undertaker capable of delivering that match? There's no telling. In short doses here, he looked good. Now, he did miss one of his moves, a big boot. Looked to have missed John Cena completely, so that was a little bit of an embarrassment. But I don't think it detracted really from the overall presentation. He had about as good an experience as he was going to have, and of course, he avenged his loss in the Superdome from WrestleMania 30 here. And so, Undertaker, definitely a highlight of the show, if not one of the more interesting decisions to squash John Cena like a bug in this match. And from there, we went straight into another big return. Daniel Bryan is back on the main roster. He has been cleared. He and Shane McMahon defeat Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn in their tag team match. Owens and Zayn are presently without a job in storylines. They, of course, did not get hired by Raw, so we'll see where they end up in the Superstar Shakeup next week. Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon worked fairly well as a team. Didn't seem to be any hint of a future division between them. Apparently, that storyline, at least for the time being, seems to be shelved, which is a good thing. I don't think anybody was really excited for heel Shane McMahon or heel Daniel Bryan, for that matter. As a match, this wasn't anything that special, to be completely honest with you. It was more of an angle. The segment with Shane McMahon getting beat on was quite boring in the stadium. It wasn't much better watching it on the network after the fact. Daniel Bryan coming into the match reignited the fans, but I think you could tell by this point, even with the fans excited for Bryan, their energy level was beginning to drop. This was getting fairly late in the show. And if you've never been to a WrestleMania, or if you've never been to a Big Four pay-per-view where the show goes a little bit longer, it does get to be tiring in the crowd. The longer you sit there to watch a show, you have to think you're sitting, crammed into stadium seating with, thousands of people around you. It's hot, it's stuffy. The chairs aren't the most comfortable. You could be sitting around some very boisterous fans that are not exactly making life easy on your ears. It's especially difficult the older you are. I know I felt it the morning after. Sitting in the French Quarter, I needed myself a hurricane just to kind of manage some of the pain I was feeling from sitting in those seats for 985 hours. It's not an easy thing sitting there for that long. I think it hurts the overall experience factor for the show. The more burnt out the crowds are, the less energy the wrestlers can draw from them. So, as a rule, these long shows, they kind of hurt the product, in my opinion, and I think it hurt this match too. The crowd just really wasn't into it until Brian got back there into the match. It was very disjointed as a result. I wouldn't call it a fantastic match by any stretch, but it got the job done. Brian is back. Of course, he wrestled on Tuesday night against AJ Styles. That was quite the little crackerjack match until the King of Dong Style, Shinsuke Nakamura, showed up, which we'll get to here momentarily. But Brian and Shane, winners in this match. It was fine for what it was. It was just to showcase that Brian is in fact back. Nothing more, nothing less. We moved on then to the Raw Women's Championship match. Nia Jax defeats Alexa Bliss. She does, in fact, become the new Raw Women's Champion. No Rock there to celebrate with her, so that was one of my knee-jerk predictions that did not come true among a host of others. But she did win the championship. A long match compared to what I thought it would be. This match went over 10 minutes. I thought this would be a very quick match, a squash match even. And if there was a time to do a squash match, it was this one. Alexa Bliss got a lot of offense in. Nia really should have just creamed her and moved on. But nonetheless, we do have a new women's champion on the Raw brand. So it looks like she will be staying put unless they're swapping champions, which would be very weird, considering the two titles are not one and the same. They share distinct lineages. It's going to be interesting to see how that, in fact, does work out. Nia seemed to be fairly well received by the crowd, but again, the energy in the crowd was down considerably from the start of the show. We were reaching the end, I think, in the Superdome, and that would only become more pronounced as the show continued. Not a lot to say here. Very happy for Nia Jax. She definitely did the best she could with the storyline. As you know, if you've been listening to the podcast, I've not been a big fan of this storyline in particular. I don't like the fat shaming aspect. It feels a little too passe to me, a little too boring. Not exactly a creative flair here. It's kind of generic a storyline and a very touchy one too, especially in 2018. But Nia handled it as well as you could possibly handle it. She's won the title. Let's see what happens. There's going to be a lot of interesting moves coming in the Superstar Shakeup. We'll see what the title picture looks like. But for now, her title looks to be fairly safe because, of course, Carmella cashing in on Tuesday night with Charlotte renders that option off the table. So, once again, another prediction of mine just completely by the wayside. Carmella, the new SmackDown Women's Champion. So I would imagine that she's probably staying put on Tuesday nights as well. The sky's the limit for Nia, but it is a very crowded field. And we were starting to touch on this earlier in the discussion, and I'm really sad that we weren't able to film or tape the whole discussion. We had a very interesting conversation about the state of the women's division. I'm just going to rehash a little bit of that here. Because quite frankly, we're looking at a division on both shows that is quite flush with talent, almost to the point where there's almost too many ingredients. And honestly, it's going to get to a point where someone's going to have to feel left out, just trying to get everyone involved that should be involved. My prediction for Becky Lynch not winning the Women's Battle Royal, that kind of caught me off guard. Wasn't very thrilled with that match. Not sure where she's going to wind up or what you do with her. Charlotte Flair, of course, will be an interesting one to see how they decide to use her moving forward. If the plan is to get to Ronda Rousey at some point, whether it's next year or the year after, you're going to have to figure she's going to remain factored in prominently. You have the Bayley and Sasha storyline, which hopefully will be kept away from the title. It doesn't really need it. But that's another storyline that's going to take up some TV time. There's just a lot going on. I'm not exactly sure where Asuka's going to filter out into all of this or how Nia Jax's title reign will be affected by that. There was some promotional advertisements suggesting that Asuka and Nia Jax would be competing against each other this spring. That would be quite an interesting direction to go. It would have seemed that Asuka is going to remain a babyface, or at least in the tweener role that she's been in the last few months. We'll see how that shakes out. Overall, again, I think that there's a lot of potential here. There's also a lot of potential for WWE to screw this up. We'll just have to wait and see and hope for the best. But for this night and this week, really, Nia Jax did the best that she could, and this was probably the last real high spot of the show. Now we get into what I would consider to be the three biggest disappointments of the night, and we're going to start with the WWE Championship match. AJ Styles successfully defends his WWE title against Shinsuke Nakamura. This was by far the biggest disappointment of the entire weekend. I don't think that's an exaggeration either. This is even more of a disappointment than Rusev and Jinder. Strictly from the perspective, there was so much hype in this match. So many people were so excited, myself included. This was one of two matches that basically bought my ticket to WrestleMania to see. The other being Gargano and Ciampa, which lived up to the hype and then some, in my opinion. This match was the opposite of that. It was relatively slow, uneventful. The crowd was dead in the Superdome. Really not up for this after the introductions. It was unfortunate. It was unfortunate that I wasn't able to really follow along much. Again, the seats were not exactly great, and it really kind of took you out of the experience of the match as it happened. Now, I have mixed feelings on the end of the match. You know, AJ winning, you could take or leave that. Either man had a strong case to win. That was one of the reasons I was so looking forward to the match going in. It did feel unpredictable. I, of course, was wrong in my prediction. I did choose Nakamura to win. He did not. He did, however, turn heel, which is quite frankly a shocking decision. Obviously, Nakamura can play a great heel, and he did a great job Tuesday night, really getting immersed in his heeldom. Uh, Not going to go as far to say that it was the right decision yet, though. I think that Nakamura, you know, whether or not this heel turn turns out to be the ticket for him, we'll just have to wait and see. But I think there was a lot of money left on the table. Babyface Nakamura was put into a lot of no-win situations over the last year. And Nakamura is not immune from some of the criticism. He can take it easy and he can slow it down and be a little lazy himself. It's not just Brock Lesnar that has the lazy attached to him. Nakamura can dial it in on occasion as well. So I'm not leaving him out of the blame here. But WWE in particular never really set this guy up for a lot of success. Leaving him off TV for almost a month, it seemed, after his Rumble win was not the brightest idea that they've ever had. The build for the match was very understated. And in hindsight, of course, with the match being a disappointment, it retroactively makes the build that much more of a disappointment than it was appearing to be at the time. As a match, it wasn't terrible, but considering the quality of their work in New Japan and what we know these guys can do when they're motivated, this was nothing short of a disappointment, and a big one, in the live crowd. And it was not exactly made better by a watch on the network. So this was an unfortunate casualty of the show's length, I believe. The crowd being out of this match probably hurt it worse than anything. A hot crowd for this match probably would have helped improve the aesthetics of this a lot more. But the crowd just wasn't there. It was just too long a show. And that, quite frankly, is the MO on all WrestleManias moving forward, I'm afraid. So, without really going too much more into my disappointment there, we'll go into another disappointment. Braun Strowman, the tag partner mystery angle, kind of craps itself out. In the moment, it was fun to see the kid, Nicholas. I know the live crowd had some fun with it, but short of Braun's entrance and running around and attempting to chase down the villagers from Cesaro and Sheamus's entrance, there really wasn't anything to this match. Most people were just ready to get this show over with at the time. Braun, of course, was very popular, but again, the reactions were quite muted for most of the match. Nicholas did provide a little spark. It was a very interesting visual to see the child in there. But really and truly, the Bar really deserved a better end to their title run, much like the Usos earlier. Both tag title matches were a disappointment on this show. It's a shame that WWE didn't have something better planned for Braun here. And really and truly, if Braun is not going to be in the tag picture moving forward, he needs to be up in the main event. Especially as we move into our discussion of the main event here at WrestleMania, which we'll get into now. Of course, Braun Strowman and Nicholas winning the tag titles and then vacating them the night after. So that was pretty much a waste of time. And speaking of wastes of time, we come to the main event. This is what we were building up to earlier, and this is what we're going to touch on now. A complete train wreck in every sense of the word. Braun Strowman, Brock Lesnar, and Roman Reigns turning in a stinker of a match. The network audio does not do this justice. This match was a colossal failure on every conceivable level. Nobody cared in the Superdome for this match. The boos for the entrance was about as invested as the crowd would get until the end bell. This match utterly failed on every measurable level. The build all along ran the risk of creating this very reaction, and sure enough, the crowd was toxic for both guys. They did not care. It was a mistake to put this match on last. It was a mistake to run this match in general. The storyline was not there. Nobody wanted to see it in the arena. From the moment this match began, the crowd checked out. There was a noticeable stream of people leaving during this match. Our section seemed to be relatively intact, but sections around us were starting to empty out before the match was even over. Beach balls came out, a couple at first, and then it became a flood of them all over the Superdome. A couple of people got into fights. They were preoccupied with themselves. They were ejected. A couple of other people tried to start a wave. One person on the far side of the Superdome from us attempted a wave. Only half his section got invested. And out of sympathy, a man in our section decided to try his own hand, and he was a bit more successful. But most of the crowd on our side was too busy chanting Beach Ball Mania to participate in the wave. I think the other side of the crowd was mostly invested in their cell phones. This match was a train wreck. Roman Reigns, no support whatsoever. It's very interesting, actually, listening to the match. I've actually seen this match twice now on the network. Seen this match twice in addition to the live event experience. I do not recall any chance for the match whatsoever in the early going. I heard some "Let's go Roman, Roman sucks" chants. I don't remember those chants at all. And it's interesting, we couldn't hear the audio of the ring or the microphones, but the crowd chants were circulating quite nicely all night. So this is not something that I could have missed. It might have been just not paying much attention. I was actually looking forward to this match when I entered the Superdome, but the complete no F's given mentality of the crowd kind of distracted me from really paying much attention at first. This match only got worse as it went along. It was a lazy performance. Brock and Roman, this was the exact wrong match to have at this point in the show. Everyone was worn out. They were already angsty. They didn't want to see this match. And then they went and dialed it out. Just a complete lazy performance here. And that's with all due respect to their efforts. This was just not their night. They didn't do a good enough job capturing the attention of the crowd. And by the same token, I'm not sure they could have even done so with a great match. So it's not all on them either. WWE set them up to fail. Roman kicking out of the F5, just a complete waste of the entire time they've spent building that move up this year. Did not do anyone any favors. Just another aspect of this colossal shipwreck that was a main event. Roman kicking out of 5 F5s got some bullshit chants. This is awful chants. The crowd turned on the match even more than they had when they were ignoring it. The finish of the match came out of nowhere. People were so invested in the beach balls that I don't think people were cognizant of the fact the match was actually over until they heard the bell ring. And when Lesnar started celebrating, I think the shock factor really set in, uh, at least for people that were not sitting right there on the floor level. The floor level seemed to be into the match a little bit more than the rest of the stadium was. I will grant them that in the network feed. There was some attentive fans closer to the ring, but they were the only ones that could see clearly, so I guess that makes sense. Uh, this show ended so strangely. I thought the show actually was over from the moment the video crawl ended. It seemed like we had three different video crawls, and then Roman walking up the ramp actually concluded the show on the network. So that was quite interesting. People were filing out of the stadium while he was doing his sympathy walk. They did not get the reaction that they were going for here at all. It was to be expected, of course, but I think what's more damning here is not so much they lacked the crowd support for Reigns, but the decision not to put the title on him here. They have somehow managed to achieve the worst of both worlds with Roman Reigns. Roman supporters will, and even some of his critics, I count myself as both a supporter and a critic. I'm somewhere in the middle on Roman Reigns here. A lot of people will point to WWE absolutely failing with this guy, failing to protect Roman Reigns like a top guy should be protected. And there's some validity to that. They have put so many hurdles in his path, from the disastrous appearance in the Royal Rumble in 2015 and the way they booked that match, ending the streak and being put in a position to garner hatred from the fans last year when they're trying to get him cheered. That was just a craptacular decision all of its own. The Suffering Succotash promos, you name it. Roman has not exactly had the best of times going out. And so WWE bears a lot of responsibility for that. We also have to consider, too, though, this is the third straight WrestleMania main event for Roman Reigns that has been a creative failure. WrestleMania 32 was a bad match, boring match, even. And Triple H has had some good matches since, including tonight, or Sunday night, I should say, at this point. And a great match with Angle and Rousey and his wife Stephanie. Undertaker, last year, another bad match. You could say it was because Undertaker was hurt and broken down. Yes, you can, obviously. Here we go again. WrestleMania 34. Third straight main event that's crap. Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns had a bad match. At some point you start running out of excuses. Roman Reigns has had a string of creative failures in WrestleMania. He has not been Mr. WrestleMania, to say the least, and this is the problem for Roman Reigns. WWE has not done right by him, but he has also not lived up to the moment over the last 3 years. And when you consider the relatively inconsequential match at WrestleMania 30 and the boring match they had as part of the Shield at WrestleMania 29, Roman Reigns has only had one good WrestleMania performance. That was at WrestleMania 31, and even that match was partly saved by the interference and the run-in of Seth Rollins. Without Seth Rollins cashing in, there's no guarantee that match is remembered as favorably as it is. It was certainly a spot bit better than this match. This was a disappointment. Expected a lot more out of these two, and maybe it was a perspective, maybe it was the fact of the crowd just crapping all over them. Maybe they decided to dial it in. I don't know. It was not the best night for Roman. But whatever your perspective on Roman is, whether you think it's his failure as a performer, whether it's the company failing to protect him, it's irrelevant at this point. Roman Reigns is done as a successful top guy. That does not mean that the WWE is going to give up on him. And it doesn't mean that he's not going to be the face of the company moving forward for the next decade. And it doesn't mean that WWE won't even turn a profit. As I mentioned tonight over at Cage Side Seats, WWE can turn a profit and still shoot themselves in the foot. At Raw 25, something close to 4.5 million viewers tuned in for Raw 25. That's almost a million viewers more than their usual viewership, and that's at the good times. Over the last year, Raw has been somewhere between 2.5 and 3.5 million. 4.5 million tuned in to Raw 25. So even on Raw's best days, there's a million fans on the periphery that is at least somewhat interested in wrestling. If WWE's creative direction, the length of their shows, whatever WWE's doing is keeping a million fans from tuning back in, that's hurting their bottom line. It doesn't mean they're not profitable. It just means they're shooting themselves in the foot. A million extra viewers is big money for the company. And in the case of Roman Reigns, it's a similar scenario. You can still make money with Roman Reigns. You can still be a main event player. But the window for Roman to be a transcendent top-level superstar on the level of a John Cena or an Austin or a Rock is gone, I think. And it's not coming back at this point, and there's nothing you can do really to salvage him. Even a heel turn wouldn't work at this point. I've been on the train of turning Roman heel for a long time, but honestly, I don't think that there's any hope of salvaging him at this point. A heel turn right now, he would probably just be like Sheamus from 2015. The crowd just wouldn't really care. The window has closed. They've lugered him. And so you simultaneously have Roman appear to be this unbeatable Superman in the eyes of a lot of his detractors, while at the same time, Roman never seems to win a big match when it counts. He couldn't win in WrestleMania 31 in Santa Clara. He's lost multiple multi-person matches over the last few years. Lost at SummerSlam last year. He lost the title to Seth Rollins, clean as a whistle, shortly before his suspension. He has come up short the last couple of Royal Rumbles in memorable fashion, which is kind of ironic, again, considering he's been in the final 2 or 3 of every Royal Rumble he's participated in since 2014. So it's kind of weird to use that as a metric, but in a lot of ways, being the last one out has almost done more harm to him than good. And even his 2015 Rumble win did a lot of harm to him. So it's not like the 2015 Rumble win is a qualitative success for him. He has had his moments on the main roster. He has had success. He won the WWE title at WrestleMania. He beat The Undertaker at WrestleMania. But Roman Reigns has just not been able to escape this sense that WWE keeps stalling his push. It's so weird. It's a contradiction in terms almost. You feel on the one hand that WWE keeps trying to coronate him. They keep trying to launch him as the face of the company, but at the same time, he's been wrestling in the main event for 4 years now. He's a multiple-time world champion, Grand Slam champion to boot, main evented 4 straight WrestleManias. At what point is the coronation complete? At what point do you stop building him and you start riding this train to prosperity? It's the kind of the funny thing. People keep talking about Roman Reigns needing this coronation moment. He's already had his coronation moment. He is a main eventer. He can't get any more of a main eventer than he already is. He's really facing the Okada problem. And, of course, if you watch New Japan, Okada, the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, at his young age, has done everything he really can with New Japan. And now, he has another decade of competition left in him on a top level with the company, but he's already done everything. He's beaten everybody he needs to beat. And I think Roman Reigns kind of has that same problem. What do you do with Roman Reigns moving forward that you haven't already done? He's already rebelled against the authority and conquered them. He's already won at WrestleMania. He won the title at WrestleMania. He's a multiple-time world champion. He's won the Rumble. And he's also, I apologize for being sick, guys. I know you can tell it's getting a little worse as the broadcast goes on here. But, he's already done everything he can do. He's never finished outside of the final 3 of a Rumble since 2014. He's won Superstar of the Year. He's won every title there is to win, and he's won several of them multiple times. So I mean, it's not like Roman Reigns has a plethora of storyline options here. Really, the last one to knock off was Brock Lesnar, the sort of unfinished business storyline that WWE never really picked up on from WrestleMania 31. So I mean, once you get past Brock Lesnar, everyone he seems to be lined up to face is someone he's already faced. There's nothing new with Roman anymore. He's done it all. And that's a problem when he has another 5 to 10 years at least of being on top of the WWE. It's going to create a problem until they build up some new talent to keep him fresh. I don't know who that would be at this point, but, they're going to have to try. You have a lot of people that the fans are supporting. Daniel Bryan, Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, Seth Rollins, Finn Balor to a level. You have a lot of people the fans want to get behind, and here you have Roman Reigns, who is just kind of sitting there on top. He's just kind of going over like a fart in church right now. And I can't stand the argument that apologists give that, the people that hate don't embody the full picture. No, that's true. They don't. But if 50% of the crowd loves the guy and 50% hate the guy, you've still got a hell of a problem because half your crowd hates him. Just because they're not following the script doesn't mean that 50% that don't want Roman Reigns don't have a voice. It doesn't mean they shouldn't get a say. At the end of the day, the WWE is offering a product. They're offering a product, and as consumers of that product, fans have a right to voice their displeasure if they don't enjoy the product they're getting. And before people say, well, they should quit watching, a lot of people have. Let's not pretend that the ratings have been stable over the last 4 years. It's an uncomfortable fact for a lot of apologists of Roman Reigns to point out. The WWE has seen quite a lot of attrition in their viewership over the last 4 years. Since 2014, the average rating has dropped by a measure of close to 40%. 40% of their paying audience gone over the last 4 years. Guess what started 4 years ago? It's not a coincidence. This most recent era of WWE programming really kicked off in 2014 with Bryan's injury. They started building up the Shield, their solo pushes. And that's not just on Roman. It's not all on Roman. But it's the age-old adage in professional wrestling. The top guy gets the credit for the success, and the top guy gets the blame for failure. He gets credit because he moves merchandise. Roman Reigns sells merch. Roman Reigns has become a quality main eventer as long as he's not wrestling at WrestleMania, apparently. Roman Reigns can bring the goods in the ring. His character is not the best, but it's far ahead of what it was in 2015. Roman has improved quite a lot. I think Roman's mentality outside of the ring can hurt him as much as it helps him. It's good that he's taken on a position of leadership in the locker room, but his handling of criticism, while probably satisfying to him and his fans, leaves a lot of people sour. He kind of brushes it off. And that's a problem that a lot of fans have with WWE. They brush off the negative reaction. They spin it with their propaganda. And that's what it is. I know that's a strong word to use, but it's basically propaganda. Talking about how crowds boo who they normally cheer and cheer who they normally boo. That's not really the case. It used to be, but now the crowds are almost all smart. The proportion of fans that are hardcore fans has never been higher, it would seem. The Miz almost always gets cheered and booed. It's not just the smart crowds cheering him anymore. He's getting cheered all over the place. Roman Reigns isn't just getting booed the night after WrestleMania. He's getting booed all the time. He's also getting cheered, but again, you can't just go by one half of the equation. It's not just a matter of getting cheered by half the crowd. He's getting booed by half the crowd too. Sometimes it's worse. Sometimes it's a little better. But the fact is, a sizable part of the WWE viewership does not want this man as the face of the company. And at the end of the day, the customer is always right. Because if the customer doesn't like what the customer is getting, the customer quits watching. And that's been the case over the last 4 years. There's an entire pool of fans that would come back if they were given a reason to. Raw 25 proved that. If those fans that tuned in for Raw 25 didn't care at all about wrestling, they wouldn't have tuned in. The fact that that many people tuned in to see what was going on shows you there's a huge pool of lapsed fans that'll come back if WWE gives them a reason to. What is the number one key to getting lapsed fans back? Give them the star on top that drives the boat. The straw that stirs the drink. Reggie Jackson, that used to be his nickname. You need the star, the big star to drive the ship. Roman Reigns is not that man. And after Sunday, he never will be. He's Diesel at this point. He's Diesel. He is 1996 Shawn Michaels. He's your top guy in name only. He's not going to move numbers like a top guy. He's not going to get you mainstream success. He's not going to appeal to people that he doesn't already appeal to. He's not bringing in new eyeballs. He's not Stone Cold going on the talk shows and getting new people to watch. He's just not that guy. To be fair, John Cena wasn't that guy either for parts of his run. But at least John Cena started out popular. You can justify John Cena's run by his popularity early on. Roman Reigns has never had that. At least not on the level of a Cena. And I think Cena would probably be, the measuring stick of a top guy in this era. Cena really is the first true top guy of the internet era. Rock and Austin were around from the start of the internet wrestling community, but they were still coming from an era where the internet community was very much a small minority of the fan base. That's not the case anymore. We're fully in the internet era now. John Cena started it. Roman Reigns is now continuing it. Just because you hear criticism on the internet doesn't mean it's invalid. Roman Reigns has been squandered. Could he have been a top guy on the level of an Austin, The Rock, Cena? Who knows? I'm of the mind to believe he could have been had they used him properly. But we'll never know for sure. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. So, I mean, you look at this main event, excuse me, and you see the result. You see the crowd reaction. They have pretty much squandered this guy constantly. WrestleMania 34 is just another sad chapter in this saga. They're going to rematch for the Universal Championship in Saudi Arabia at the Greatest Royal Rumble pay-per-view. It's a steel cage match. Roman and Brock are going to go at it again. We'll see if Roman wins the title there. I think that would be a sad statement on WWE's main event picture. They have to go out of the country for Roman to win the title without being booed unmercifully. It's probably what's going to happen. We'll see. We'll talk about that as we get closer to the event. But that was WrestleMania 34. A sad note to end on. A very up and down show, uneven. But it was an eventful show, to say the least. A lot of memorable moments. Of course, Asuka's streak ending. Ronda Rousey's debut. Daniel Bryan's return. And the poor crucifixion of Roman Reigns on this show. Nakamura's heel turn even. It's definitely a memorable show. I wouldn't call it a great show. I wouldn't call it a terrible show. It was an uneven show. But I think as much of a spectacle as WrestleMania is, and as much as I would recommend it just from the perspective of getting that feeling, that spectacle, I wouldn't call this show worth it, honestly. I had more fun in Biloxi, Mississippi 2 days before WrestleMania than I did at WrestleMania. And we didn't do anything in Biloxi but gamble and sit on the beach. So that should say a lot about the experience and how long of a show this was. and how much of a disappointment it was in certain areas. Takeover the night before completely outclassed WrestleMania in almost every measurable way. Almost every measurable way. Takeover was the superior show. It was shorter, it was better. The crowd was more into it throughout more of the show. It was just better. There's no way to really sugarcoat it. It was just a better show. And so when you look at WrestleMania moving forward, can I recommend people going? Yes and no. If you've never been to a WrestleMania, I'd say at least try it once. Really save up money though. The further away you are in these big stadiums, the worse your experience is going to be. It's an expensive trip, but if you're going to do it right. I paid about $600 total for the tickets that I purchased for the show among our group. And for $600, I was let down quite a lot. The Superdome, not a good venue. Uh, New Orleans as a host city is tremendous. I'm not knocking New Orleans at all. We had the time of our lives in New Orleans. They call it the Big Easy for a reason. I hate that I came home sick. As you can hear me all stuffed up and stuffy here. Uh, I'm sure it's a pleasing sound hearing me sniffle. I didn't appreciate coming home sick from New Orleans, but love the city. New Orleans is fantastic. If you've never been to New Orleans, drop what you're doing and go now. But as far as WrestleMania goes, if you've never been, I would say it's worth it just to knock it off the bucket list. But boy, that's a long show. It's a long, miserable show. And quite frankly, in an age where the shows are going 6 or 7 hours, it's not worth it. You're not going to have a legendary WrestleMania in an era where you're doing 6 or 7 hour shows. It's just a fact of life at this point. It's not going to happen. It's too long. The crowd is too gone. And without the crowd, you're not going to have a truly memorable experience. That's something a lot of people don't realize. A bad crowd can destroy a good match. Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar as a match was not very good, but the crowd made it so much worse than it was. You watch that match back with a muted audio, it's not a great match, but it's passable. You watch it with that audio and that disinterested crowd, and that match goes into the toilet. John Cena and Randy Orton from the Royal Rumble in 2015, or 2014, excuse me. You mute that crowd audio, match is okay. Nothing special, but it's okay. You put the crowd audio in there, it destroys that match. Crowd backlash hurts matches. Hot crowds help matches. The Daniel Bryan tag match at WrestleMania this year is proof positive. Bryan come into the match, the crowd got hot, and the match improved by leaps and bounds. It's not just a matter of Bryan going in there flying at 60 million miles an hour. The crowd got into it, and it made the match seem more important. You need the crowd, and you're not going to have the crowd for 7 hours. It's just too long. You got kids getting restless. You got older people getting tired. You got younger adults losing interest. It's not a comfortable experience. And so from that perspective, I don't recommend going if you've already been to one, unless you get really good seats. We were sitting essentially on the floor level, and even on the floor level, seats quality were just terrible. And we paid over $600. To get floor side seats, you could be over 1,000 or more, depending on how many people are going. I can't recommend the experience in good conscience. But that's not to say that the spectacle of it isn't worth something. It's WrestleMania. If you want to feel the spectacle of being in WrestleMania, then absolutely go for it. I'm not going to dissuade you from that. But if you're actually going for a show's quality, if you're going to see an all-time great show, I would honestly just save your money at this point, because I don't think we're ever getting a good WrestleMania on the level of some of the past shows until they cut the show's time length down. It's gotten to a point now where we're in the era of multi-person matches for the sake of getting everyone on the card. They don't hardly build classic rivalries all up and down the card anymore for WrestleMania like they used to. A lot of this year's card came together in the last 3 weeks leading up to WrestleMania. That is antithetical to the MO of the old WrestleManias. WrestleMania 6, some of its matches were built up for almost a year before it actually took place. And I understand you can't do that with every feud now. But 3 weeks is not enough time to get people truly invested in WrestleMania like they used to be. 3 weeks just ain't enough. But that's what you get in an era when it's just about getting as many people on the card as possible. I am very much a supporter of a meritocracy in wrestling in that perspective. Half the people that appeared on WrestleMania, be it the pre-show or the main show, if I were booking, they wouldn't be on it. That's harsh. As a human being, I know it sucks to take a paycheck away from people. So on the human level, I understand it. As a consumer, as a fan of the product, it's a different story. It actively hurts the product to smash as many people in that card as possible. The tag title match on SmackDown suffered because of it. The U.S. title match suffered because of it. The women's battle royal, the men's battle royal, they were designed to get as many people in those matches as possible. I don't understand why so many, women from NXT were in that showcase. Or excuse me, I don't understand. I don't understand the mentality behind it. They brought up so many women for the match. Nia Jax and Alexa Bliss, it was a decent story, but you telling me that title match had to happen on the card. It had to take 10 minutes away from the tag title match on SmackDown. The Usos have been one of the most exciting acts in the company over the last year. Could Charlotte and Asuka not have used that time in their match? Asuka and Charlotte had one of the best matches on the entire card, but I felt like they could have gone a lot longer than they did. That match actually felt like it went pretty quickly. It lasted 13 minutes. You couldn't have given the 10 minutes Nia and Alexa got to Charlotte and Asuka. And that's not just picking on the women either. Did that U.S. title match really have to take place? It lasted 8 minutes. Could the SmackDown tag title match, which was at least a little bit more interesting, have not gotten that time? Was the world really clamoring for a Jinder Mahal title victory? Is there a law that says Randy Orton has to be on the main card? Could he not have gone into the Battle Royal? Was the Raw tag title match even worth doing the way they did it? Does it help Braun Strowman that much? I mean, let's be honest here. I would rather people not be on the card at all than be wasted. That's what Braun was here. He was essentially wasted. It was a neat visual in the moment, but it means jack all in the long run. Doesn't get him more over. It doesn't really even make sense. It's just the way that they do these cards. They try to get so much on them. There's no reason to have 14 matches in a single show. 11 on the main card, 3 on the pre-show. They used to do that for WrestleMania in the old days. WrestleMania 5, I think, if memory serves, had something close to 15 matches. At least it felt like 15. And those shows sucked just as bad. WrestleMania is at its best when you pare down the card. You get 8 or 9 matches, 7 or 8 of which have a hot angle behind them. or at least a story that's longer than 3 weeks. That's just my perspective. Maybe I'm out to lunch. I could be out to lunch on this one. Who knows? It's my take, though. So, I can't recommend it from the perspective of going to see an all time great show. If you want to see a great wrestling show, I would recommend going to a pay per view like Money in the Bank or one of the B shows. I think those have more of a tendency to surprise people with their quality than the main shows do at this point because all of the big shows have become so bloated. I think you're better off going to a Money in the Bank or a Battleground than you are a WrestleMania if you're looking for quality. If you're looking for spectacle, go. The Rumble, Mania, SummerSlam to a smaller degree. Maybe not so much Survivor Series anymore, but if you're just looking for the spectacle or just to knock it off a bucket list, I would say go. But if you're going to actually see a good show, I wouldn't bother. Not for the price you have to pay to go. I was somewhat lucky from the perspective that I was able to kind of spread the cost around a little bit with some of the people that I was traveling with. Between the room, the tickets, food expenses, souvenirs, and that was being conservative with my money. All told, I'm, $1,600, $1,700 down. And that's to attend TakeOver and WrestleMania. If you're going for any of the other shows, you're going to spend over $2,000 easy. Unless you live within an hour of the show and can stay in your own house, if you have to rent a room, rates are going up tremendously for WrestleMania time, no matter where you go. Some rooms that were going for $50 or $60 a couple days after WrestleMania were going for twice that, 3 times that leading up to the show. It's not cheap. And I don't think it's worth the money you pay for personally. But again, your mileage may vary. There's people that liked WrestleMania 34. I'm mixed feelings on it. I'm glad I can say I went to a WrestleMania, but it did not live up to the hype for me personally. So that's WrestleMania 34, a mixed bag. But the top of the card, definitely more problematic than the undercard was triumphant. So I think on the whole, got to be a little bit dour about this show. Superstar Shakeup coming up this week. Next week, I should say, at this point. It's going to be interesting to see where people go. We'll probably get some rumors that illuminate the Superstar Shakeup a little bit as we get closer. Obviously, some of the champions will probably be staying put. It would actually be interesting to see if the WWE champion and the Universal champion switch roles. I don't know how you can transition the SmackDown Women's Champion over to Raw and vice versa. Ditto the tag titles. We'll see how it goes. It was a great night for North Carolina. I tell you that. All 4 big moments of the show for me involved people from my home state. Of course, Matt Hardy kicked it off by winning the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. He's from Cameron. Cedric Alexander from my hometown of Charlotte, winning the Cruiserweight title. That was a big moment. Very happy for Cedric. Of course, Charlotte ending the streak and retaining her women's title at WrestleMania. Another win for the QC. And then Braun Strowman from Cheryl's Ford. That's just about 20 minutes up the road from where I live. Winning the tag titles. Of course, unfortunately, 2 of the 4 triumphs from WrestleMania from the Carolinas would not be so triumphant later. Braun forfeiting the titles the next night. Charlotte losing her title to a Carmella cash-in. But it was a good night for the QC. And a good night for the Carolinas in general. So that was definitely part of the fun of WrestleMania. We'll see how the Superstar Shakeup works. There's a lot of interesting potential here. I don't think WrestleMania has fully quashed that potential. But I do believe that WrestleMania kind of put a dent in it because it does feel like we're kind of sitting in place yet again. A lot of people, even those that are Roman haters, and again, I am not a Roman Reigns hater. I know when I criticize Roman's performance or certain aspects of his character, that's the go-to response from apologists. And I would like to reiterate, it's not just apologists that are the problem. Blind Roman haters that give him no credit are just as big a problem as the blind apologists are. I am not an apologist for Roman Reigns. I am not a hater of Roman Reigns. I'm a critic, but I'm also a supporter. I want him to succeed. That's why I critique. I offer my criticism as a longtime fan, not because it's fun to do or not because I enjoy starting arguments. It's because as a longtime fan and as a customer of this product for so long, I know what I like and I know what a lot of other people like. I offer critiques because I feel like there are things they could do different. What are my qualifications? Well, I'm a lifelong fan. I've seen a lot. Seen a lot in 30 years. It's just a matter of being passionate about the product. When you stop being passionate, that's when you stop watching. A lot of people have reached that level over the last 4 years. A lot of passionate people that hung with the company through thick and thin quit watching. I know several of them personally. I know some people that started watching in the Attitude Era that didn't give up on wrestling completely until 2015 and 2016. So it's all about that passion. If you have passion, it makes you more interested in seeing it work out right. That's what it comes down to. WWE feels like it's stuck in place because they refuse to just pull the trigger on this deal. Roman Reigns failed in his quest to win the title at WrestleMania. And so it feels like we're still stuck in the same rut we were before. A lot of people were hoping that at least with Roman holding the title, that they could move forward and tell new stories. Maybe after the show in Saudi Arabia, the Greatest Royal Rumble, towards the end of the month, maybe things will pick up then. I know a lot of people are looking forward to the Roman Reigns Samoa Joe match at Backlash. We'll see what happens. Superstar Shakeup will go a long way to showcasing what WWE has planned over the spring and summer. This is traditionally the point in the year where things tend to be simultaneously exciting and depressing. The months after WrestleMania can sometimes drag. There's two really dead points in a wrestling year. When you get past SummerSlam these days, especially past Survivor Series at least, but honestly, September, October, into November and December, the last months of the year, that's a real dead point for the year now. The product is not as good in those months, not as good during football season, it seems. Product really slacks off, and it also slacks off after WrestleMania. Seems like it takes a few months for them to get their bearings back and get on the road to SummerSlam. By the time we get to Money in the Bank, things typically tend to pick up. Battleground tends to be a more exciting show than most in July. Some years it's held in June, but I've always associated Battleground with July myself. So that stretch from Money in the Bank and Battleground to SummerSlam, it tends to be an exciting time. And then you have the build from Royal Rumble to WrestleMania. So we're getting into this period where traditionally things tend to slow up a little bit. Hopefully WWE can keep interest up. We'll just have to wait and see. Guys, that's going to do it for tonight. As you can tell, I'm a little bit under the weather. Not really interested in going too awful much further. Hopefully the technical issues we had earlier have been rectified a little bit. We'll be working on fixing those for future broadcasts. Sorry once again for today's snafu. Can't really help internet outages. Again, another big thanks to Ryan Sayo and our special guest, Taker's Minion, today for joining us the first half of this podcast. I will be appearing on the Shooting the Breeze podcast Saturday morning. We'll be talking more about the WrestleMania experience from New Orleans. That was tremendous fun last time. I am so very much looking forward to that show. It'll be Saturday morning, 11 a.m. Set your dial, be there or be square. It'll be a good show. Of course, Metal Matt with his Ruthless Aggression podcast, that drops Friday evenings. Last week's show, Unforgiven 2002, quite a memorable show in its own right. If I'm not mistaken, he'll be moving on now to No Mercy 2002. That was really a good show. You're going to really enjoy that podcast. And be sure to check his show out Friday evening. All of the fine podcasts from the extended Cage Side Seats family. Be sure to give those a listen. Check in at the daily threads and the nightly threads over at Cage Side Seats for information on those podcasts. Just be a part of the conversation. It's always good fun over there. It's a really great community. If you're listening to this podcast and have never visited Cage Side Seats, I would heartily recommend checking them out. It's a great website, a pretty inviting atmosphere. Just stay away from the Roman Reigns discussions and you'll be okay. I am Biff Kensington. That'll do it for tonight. Be sure to tune in Shooting Debris Saturday morning at 11. I'll be back with you for the last call, midnight. We'll continue our special trivia contest. We do have the prize selected. I will be announcing the official prize for the trivia contest we're doing on the last call. That's Saturday nights at midnight. We'll be back next week with a brand new edition of the Queen City Express. Until then, guys, hope you're feeling better than I am. You have yourself a wonderful evening. I am Biff Kensington. You are listening to the Queen City Express. Take care, guys.